This question comes straight from ww1. After our last video, what if electricity was discovered 1,000 years earlier? ww1 asked in the comment section, what if we discovered nukes halfway through World War I? Now, that's a bold question, and exactly the kind we love here at Just Imagine X. This channel is about your imagination. All right, let's step back in time. The year is 1916. Europe has already been bleeding for 2 years. Millions of soldiers have died in muddy trenches stretching from the North Sea all the way to Switzerland. Germany and Austria-Hungary are locked in a grinding war against Britain, France, and Russia. Italy has switched sides to join the Allies, and the United States hasn't even entered the fight yet. The war has already unleashed terrifying new technology: machine guns that mow down entire charges, flamethrowers spewing liquid fire, tanks rattling across the battlefield, and clouds of poison gas drifting over no man's land. But despite all this, the front lines barely move. Armies fight for months to gain a few hundred yards of mud. It's stalemate. Now imagine that right in the middle of this nightmare, someone cracks the code of nuclear fission. Instead of waiting until the 1940s, scientists figure it out in 1915. And by 1916, a crude nuclear bomb exists. It wouldn't be as refined as the ones dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but it wouldn't need to be. Even a rough, inefficient bomb would be enough to level a city. Suddenly, the world's deadliest stalemate has a new player, the nuclear age. The question then becomes, who gets there first? If Germany got the bomb, they might target Paris, the heart of France, a city filled with civilians, railroads, and government buildings. A single strike could cripple the French war effort in one horrifying instant. If the Allies somehow developed it first, Berlin would almost certainly be the target. Imagine the German capital erased in seconds, the Kaiser's palace obliterated, the government shattered before anyone could even process what had happened. Either way, history's first nuclear detonation would not be a quiet test in the desert. It would happen in the middle of a crowded European city, killing tens of thousands instantly and scarring millions who survived. The military shockwave would be immense. World War I strategies were built on attrition. Generals believed that if you just kept throwing soldiers at the enemy, eventually the other side would collapse. Trench systems, artillery barrages, and fortified positions defined the battlefield. But a nuclear weapon renders all of that meaningless. You can't dig a trench deep enough to escape a city-destroying blast. You can't hide behind barbed wire when entire neighborhoods vanish in seconds. For soldiers who thought the machine gun was the worst thing they'd face, learning that their capital city could disappear overnight would crush morale instantly. The war would no longer be about holding ground or capturing trenches. It would be about who had the bomb and how many more they could make. And here's the darkest shift of all. In real history, most of the killing happened on the battlefield. Civilians suffered greatly, but the front line was where the slaughter took place. With nuclear weapons, civilians would become the main targets. Paris, Berlin, London, each could be reduced to rubble in the blink of an eye. Entire families would be erased. Entire neighborhoods turned to ash. Survivors wouldn't even understand the dangers of radiation. In 1916, fallout and long-term contamination were concepts no one had words for. People might return to rebuild in the ruins without realizing they were slowly being poisoned. Generations could be devastated not just by the war itself, but by invisible sickness that no one could treat or even explain. What about the United States? In our actual timeline, America entered the war in 1917 after German submarines sank American ships and the infamous Zimmermann telegram revealed plans for Mexico to join Germany. But in this alternate history, things might unfold very differently. America could stay out longer, horrified at what Europe was doing to itself, or it might jump in sooner, desperate to secure nuclear technology before either side gained complete control. Either way, the Atlantic Ocean would provide a cushion of safety. American cities would be far from the reach of European bombs, and that distance would give the United States a massive advantage in the post-war world. Now, here's where history branches again. If only one bomb were used, the war might end almost immediately. Imagine Berlin destroyed and Germany surrendering out of fear, or Paris leveled and the Allies rushing to negotiate. The sheer terror of one nuclear blast might be enough to stop the war in its tracks. But what if both sides had the bomb? One strike could trigger another, and then another. Paris could be gone, Berlin could follow, London could burn, and Vienna could vanish. Instead of just one mushroom cloud, there could be dozens. Europe might become a patchwork of radioactive craters by 1917, And remember, there were no treaties or international rules about such weapons. The Geneva Conventions had banned poison gas, but they certainly didn't anticipate mushroom clouds. Everything would be improvised in the heat of panic. The aftermath would depend on how far things escalated. If only 1 or 2 bombs were dropped, maybe humanity would recoil in horror and ban the weapon forever. Nuclear disarmament could have started in the 1920s instead of the 1960s. But if multiple bombs were unleashed, the damage would be beyond imagining. Millions dead, governments collapsing, farmland poisoned for generations, water supplies undrinkable. And the worst part? No one in 1916 had the tools to understand or fix it. Doctors at the time were still prescribing brandy and leeches as treatments. How would they handle radiation poisoning, cancers, and birth defects? They wouldn't. Entire populations might vanish, not from bullets or gas, but from invisible forces they couldn't even see. This leads to the bigger question. Could humanity in 1916 even handle nuclear weapons? The answer is almost certainly no. Scientific knowledge was limited. Diplomacy was fragile. Political leaders were reckless and, in many cases, arrogant. Giving them nuclear bombs would be like handing a loaded gun to someone who doesn't even know what bullets do. They'd pull the trigger without hesitation, and by the time they realized the consequences, it would already be too late. In real history, the world barely managed to contain nuclear weapons after World War II, and that was with decades of scientific progress and international communication. Drop them into 1916, and civilization itself might not make it through the decade. So what if we discovered nukes halfway through World War I? The war might have ended years earlier, but not with weary soldiers shaking hands in 1918. It would have ended with mushroom clouds rising over Europe, millions more civilians dead, entire nations destroyed, and history completely rewritten. There might have been no World War II, but only because there would be nothing left to fight over. The 20th century could have been cut short, remembered not as the age of progress, jazz, space travel, and technology, but as the century that ended before it ever really began. And that's today's What If. A huge thanks to ww1 for the suggestion. This is your channel as much as it is ours. We take your wild questions, your strange ideas, and your bold scenarios, and we bring them to life. So if you've got an idea burning in your mind, drop it in the comments. You could be the next shout-out right here on Just Imagine X. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because sometimes the scariest part of history isn't what happened, it's what could have happened.